she's going to do something very special today. She's going to take us on a journey, actually many journeys. And as I know, I'm sure all of you miss traveling, or at least most of you miss traveling as much as I do right now. So I think you all enjoy going on a journey with her, and you're all excited as much as I am to start. The first part of this session, Patricia will take us to France from New Jersey, where she was born and lived for many years. And she'll share with us her journey to France and how she moved from a life of doubts and uncertainty to a new, fulfilling and bold and happy life in Perpignan. At the end of this first session, you will all be able to ask questions to Patricia about her life, about her own journey. And you can submit the questions using the chat function of Zoom. Patricia will answer questions for about 10 minutes. And then we will move on to the next part of the journey, which is several journeys, our personal journey, a journey which will allow us to find our own way to turn obstacles into opportunities and eventually to live a bold or a bolder and fulfilling life. We will be divided in groups by our amazing Zoom master, Corinne, and we will be given an assignment from Patricia. We will work together, answer questions, share ideas and plans with each other. And at the end of the breakout session, we will share what our group has agreed upon or disagreed upon with Patricia. So I hope and I know you are as thrilled as I am to start and to hit the road with Patricia. So please fasten your seatbelts and get ready to go. Thank you, Patricia. It's your turn.
All right. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for that great introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I'm so excited to share my story and the experiences I've had over the last several years that have helped me to live the life I'm living today. The title of my presentation tonight is Kickstart Your Dreams, Run with the Stars, and Steer with Purpose. And I'm going to start out by reading an excerpt from my first book called Growing Bold. And it's, if you have the book, I'm on page 4. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. I entered my hotel room and flung myself across the bed in satisfied exhaustion. The late May sun slipped past the horizon, touching everything with an eerie, dusky light. I lay quietly, playing over in my mind a day spent exploring the enticing smell of hot crepes to the music of accordions and the smiling man making those crepes. Fields of vineyards and sheep flash past, quaint little villages built before America was, I thought, as I started to drowse. I caught myself, jolted awake and into reality, the reality that all of this was really happening, that I was in Lyon, France, and that 2 days before I had been in Toulouse. I wasn't dreaming. Instead, I'd made one of my dreams real. I'd spent 7 days in France and had 7 days left to explore, practice my French, and move past the old boundaries of what I thought possible for myself. Lying there, breathing French air and watching French daylight shimmer across the wall, I thought, coming here all alone and traveling to 4 different cities by train was pretty daring. You would never have thought about this, much less considered this, even a year ago. What's happening? I puzzled over that, but the answer came swiftly. You are growing bold. How did I get there? And how did I get here to this place where I'm so very comfortable in my skin, where I like who I am? How can I now take chances that I never would have taken 10 years or 5 years or even 3 years ago, experiencing unknown, welcome, exciting, and even daring new challenges. How did I embrace a life in which playing it safe was no longer the first option, choosing instead to feel truly fulfilled? That is the question that I hope to answer during our time together tonight, how I got here. That experience I had in that hotel room in Lyon, France, where I got the idea for my first book, Growing Bold, caused me to go on an inward journey to understand how I was doing these bold and daring things. Me, a shy, introverted person who often was homesick at college, how was I able to do that? Well, it started many years ago. Back in 2010, I thought I was living a happy life. I had recently landed a job after having been laid off due to the 2008 financial crisis. I was married, I was living in a beautiful home. I wanted for nothing. And so I thought my life was really good. But at the end of June 2010, I learned that my father was dying. And 6 weeks later, he was gone. Now, 6 weeks was not a lot of time for me to wrap my head around what was about to happen. And when he died, I realized that somebody as strong as he was, my superhero, could die, then I was going to die. And that caused me to reevaluate the life I was living. And I realized that I was simply going through the motions. I wasn't happy at all. And so I went on another inward journey to understand what I truly wanted from life and how I could get that. So I read books and I watched videos and TEDx talks to really learn about myself and how I could grow personally. Over that time, I was challenged at work. A boss had asked me to do something that was against my integrity, and I struggled with that because I didn't want to lose another job. But I came to terms with the fact that I needed to stand up for what I thought was right. And so I spoke up, and I did not have to do that thing that I was being asked to do, and paid a big price. I was demoted, and several weeks later, I chose to leave that organization, step back in a role, and take a contract position. But that was freeing to me because I was able to speak my mind and share my voice. And during that time at that contract role, I continued that inward journey to figure out what was important to me. I even went on a weight loss journey, losing 75 pounds. And I was starting to feel really good about myself. And then 3 years and 2 days after the death of my father, I had another loss. The loss of my mother. She had been diagnosed with lung cancer 4 months earlier. And losing her, I did not think that I could survive living life without a living parent. And so I doubted my ability, but I knew I had to try. And that first year was really rough. I mourned the loss of my mom. 5 months after her death, I broke down for the first time. It was the night before I started a new job, and I was lying in bed. And tears started rolling down my face because I realized that I would not get a phone call, that phone call that I would always get from my mom every time I started something new the day before first day. And I realized that call would not come. And so I cried and I cried and I cried. She would always tell me how well I would do, how quickly I would pick things up, how people really liked me, and that I would do a great job. And that call never came, and I cried and cried. The next day came, I started that job, and I was fine. Well, 6 months later, I had my second breakdown. And this was at my 25th college Mount Holyoke College class reunion. Now, this is supposed to be a really happy time, right? Well, that first day there the Laurel Parade was wonderful. I was dressed in white. I was reconnecting with long lost classmates. I cheered on the class of 2014 in that Laurel Parade, and it felt so good. But then in the afternoon, there was downtime in the schedule, and I was a little tired, so I thought I'd go back to my room and take a nap. I had wanted the full reunion experience, so I decided I was going to stay in the dorm. So I went back to McGregor Hall and I lay down in the bed, and all of a sudden I was overcome with tears again. And this time I was transported back 29 years to September 1985, my freshman year. And I could see myself standing on the second floor landing of South Rockefeller Hall, peering out of that big bay window down at my stepfather and my mother, who were getting in to their gunmetal gray Toyota Corolla, waving up at me and driving off home to New Jersey. And I cried. That first year, I was so homesick. And 29 years later, at reunion, I had those same feelings. I wanted to be back at home. I wanted to be with my mom. Only this time at reunion, my mom was not a 5-hour train ride away. She was gone forever. That first year was peppered with times like that, but there were good times in that first year as well. I cleaned out my mom's house of 30 plus years of accumulation in 6 weeks. I got that house on the market and sold it in 6 months' time. I landed a job in record time in 3 months, when normally it would take me 9 months to land a job. I started that job and started to make a difference right away. And in 2014, I decided I was going to start to write creatively again. I used to love to write, but after high school, I stopped completely. I decided that I wanted to do more than just journaling. And so I decided I was going to publish a blog. And so on July 4th, 2014, I published my first article entitled Tool of the Devil. Now, this was a reference to something that my mother believed about the internet. She thought that the internet was a tool of the devil. But as I pushed publish on that first article, I looked up to the heavens and hoped that she would see that I was using the internet for good. I wasn't sure if she would or not, and either way, I would continue to publish articles, but I had that hope. And then a month after that, at the 1-year anniversary of my mother's death, I was not sad. I was not breaking down in tears. Instead, I was elated because I looked back over that year and saw all that I had accomplished. And I felt like, wow, if I could do all of this without a living parent, what else could I do? And so I decided I was going to travel. I had vacation time from work, and normally I would take the 5-hour car ride from Richmond, Virginia, up to New Jersey to stay with my mom, but that was no longer an option. I remembered as a child going up to Quebec City, Canada with my family, and I remember it being so quaint. I also remembered that they spoke French there. And so I decided if I was going to travel to Quebec City, that I was going to speak their language. And so I dusted off my high school and college French, and I took this audio program. And 6 weeks later, I was on the ground talking to locals in French. I said, bonjour. And they said, bonjour, comment allez-vous? Blah, 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 blah. And I replied, huh? Because I could not understand their fast-spoken French. And then they came back with, oh, you speak English. Your accent was so good, it fooled us. And that encouraged me to continue to learn French. I would go back to Quebec City 3 or 4 more times. And during those visits, the seed that was planted in the back of my mind started to grow. Perhaps I could live in a French-speaking country. But Quebec in the winter, it was a little bit too cold for me, so I did not see that happening. But I knew that they spoke French in France, and so I decided that I would visit there to see if perhaps France was for me. And so in 2015, I visited Paris and Aix-en-Provence with a friend. And while those cities are lovely, I could not see myself living there. But I could see myself living in France. And so in 2016, I returned all by myself. And I started out in Toulouse. And that's a lovely city as well, but I didn't feel that sense of home there. While I was in Toulouse, I decided I was going to visit Perpignan. I'd seen it in a guidebook, and the pictures were lovely. And they wrote about the train station there. They said that Salvador Dali had called that train station the center of the world. So I had to see that. So I got on a train, took the 2-hour train ride for a day trip to Perpignan. And when I got to the train station and I stepped out of the doors of that train station, which, by the way, is just a normal train station, I had this overwhelming feeling of freedom as I walked down this palm tree lined street. It was this dreary, drizzly, chilly day in May, but I had this great feeling. And so I stopped and I looked up at one of the spindly pine trees and I thought, oh, could this be home? And so I explored that day. It was a Sunday, nothing was open, and I was headed back that evening, but I couldn't stop thinking about Perpignan. So back in Toulouse, 2 days later, I was in Lyon, France, where I had that epiphany, that idea for my first book, but I couldn't stop thinking about Perpignan. And so I decided to go back and spend a couple of days there to find my home. And that is where I moved my first year in France. So that is a little bit about my story, about how I came to be living in the south of France. And I want to stop here right now to open it up for questions about my story, about me, anything that you would like to know. So Corinne, if you want to take it away.
Yes, Patricia, thank you so much for sharing that with us. So if you'd like to ask Patricia a question, just go ahead and type it into the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, look at your Zoom, go to the bottom of the screen, and you'll see a little speech bubble that says chat on it. Click on that, and you'll see the chat open. So while questions are coming in, Patricia, I'll start with one of my own.
Okay.
So yeah, first of all, what an incredible life story. You've certainly had a roller coaster of emotions that you've gone through. And I think one of my questions for you is, what do you think you've learned as you've faced adversity at different times of your life, sometimes very similar adversity? What do you think you've learned about dealing with and moving forward those instances from instance to instance?
I think that each instance has made me stronger. It has made me realize that I am stronger than I think, stronger than I know. And in traversing those obstacles, those heartaches, and coming out the other side, as I said, after that first year without my mom and dad, I expected to be very sad. But in fact, it was just confirmation that they had instilled in me, they had taught me everything I needed to manage through life and do well in life. And so I think the key thing there that I learned was I'm stronger than I know, whether or not I know it.
That's great. I think it's something that we all need to remember on a regular basis. So we have a question from Ellen, and she, first of all, says, great to see you. And then asks, what was the biggest challenge in moving to another country, practically as well as emotionally?
I think there are different stages. So I think, first of all, believing that I had the dream that I wanted to move to France, but I didn't necessarily believe that I could do it. So there was that first hurdle that of getting past, oh, well, can I meet all of the visa requirements? Can I actually do it on my own? So that was one big hurdle. I think that first year was another big hurdle, because getting there and making it there that first day, that was the elation that I felt like that one, at that 1 year anniversary of my mom's death. But then 2 weeks later, realizing, oh, I quit my job and I really don't have a plan. I had a plan to get there, but that was it. That kind of made me feel like, oh, what have I done? Did I make this mistake? And so that was another big challenge that I had to work through personally. And I think that took quite a while, because there was this back and forth, this tug of war that, oh yeah, I did it. Oh, who do you think you are? Do you think you can really pull this off? So this back and forth. So I think after the first 6 or 7 months, that kind of settled down. And so I was like, okay, I've made it through this long. I think I can make it longer. And then logistically, I think, I don't know, I'm still going through it, right? So I'm almost 3 years in, Ellen. So there are different hurdles at different time. I think definitely the administration, getting through, renewing my visa every year. And recently I, tried to exchange my driver's license, and that's still kind of in the works. And so it's this back and forth. And the fact that it's in a foreign language, even though I'm proficient at it now, that's still a struggle. So I think to break it down into those 3 pieces, that would be it.
Great answer. So our next question is from Sylvia, which says, what were some of the obstacles you faced when you were publishing your first book?
Okay. So when I got the idea for my first book, that was, I had the idea and I knew what I wanted to write. So getting it out, it took me maybe 6 weeks or 2 months to get it written. But then working with an editor, that was the first challenge, because I'm a very logical person. I'm a project manager by trade. So I outlined the book and I knew it made sense logically. But in working with the editor, who is a structural editor, she's like, oh, this story you've got in chapter 4, that belongs in chapter 1. And she was moving things all around. And so I was tied to the way it was. And so letting go of that and allowing that book to take the shape that it is in now was really difficult. The second thing that the second biggest obstacle in publishing the book was, once all the editing was done and I had and I got that back from my editor, because I had pushed her, was, oh, am I really going to share my personal stories with the world, right? I'd written it, I was really excited, I couldn't wait to get this out. But then I had this hesitation of, oh, I don't really want to, share all of this. I'm a little bit afraid. And so that I got the approval from my editor that one morning, and by that evening, I'd worked through the emotions to say, Patricia, you wrote this book so that you could help people, so that they could live bigger, bolder lives, more satisfactory lives. If you put this on your shelf and nobody reads it, what good is it? So getting through that fear of, well, what are people going to say about it? Or are they going to judge my stories? So those were the 2 obstacles.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're both very emotional obstacles, but I can completely understand where they're coming from. Yes. It's very easy to get tied to your writing and not want anyone else to affect it. Great. Our next question is from Hannah. And she's asking, how did you know that starting to write professionally and moving to France were concrete goals and not just something that you were a fantasy of yours or something that you were just inclined to do? And was that realization slow or quick? And there's several parts of this question. And also, how did that compare to other major decisions you made in your life, like jobs or marriage?
I think that I've started out as a very logical person and relying on making decisions based on logic. And that got me so far in life. I would plan. Oh, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And oftentimes things didn't work out in that order. And so I've learned now to not necessarily be completely logical in the decisions that I'm making. So in terms of writing, deciding to write the book, deciding to move to France, I think those were decisions that grew out of my intuition. They were more of something I knew I had to do versus, oh, well, I think that this is the right thing for me to do, because moving to France was completely illogical. Quitting my job and moving it's still completely illogical, but it feels right. So I think that intuition really is starting to play a bigger and bigger role in the decisions that I make. Not that I don't use logic, but if I feel something, I'm inclined to go for it. And what was the third part of the question?
How did that compare to previous large major life decisions that you've made?
Okay. So I think that previous life decisions I've made, I was thinking about it, like getting married. I got married basically not out of love. It was more a logical decision. Well, if I marry this guy, then I can, I had this entrepreneurial business on the side, but the health insurance was, expensive. But if I marry this guy who I liked well enough, but not necessarily enough to love, then I can get health insurance. And so that was a very logical decision, but it did not work out well for me. So that's one, I think that's how a contrast to that, oh, I'll do this and then this will happen and this will happen. And that went out the window. So I think it's definitely the decisions I make now are more intuitive. Although I do look at the logical side of things too, a little bit.
Oh, it's important. You got to keep a little logic in there. So we have time for one more question, but for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, hopefully we can find another time for you to be able to ask Patricia them. The last question we'll finish up with is from Demetra. And it's, oh, apologies. It was not supposed to be from Demetra. I apologize, but we will go with that one. So from Demetra, which is, what advice would you give to your younger self in helping her find her way to happiness and meaning? So if we go, let's say 10 years ago, what would you have told yourself?
And you'll understand this a little later from something I share a little later. I would tell myself, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And that relates to the idea that one of the beliefs that I had that my mom instilled in me was, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. You don't leave a job without having one in hand. And so that guided me for many years. And that kept me in this idea of, I have to have this job and I have to, and that kind of cemented me down. And even to the idea of, well, moving to France, leaving my job and moving to France, that's not logical. It's not, I'm going against that grain. But if I, 10 years ago, go back 10 years, I would say, I would advise myself to think about nothing ventured, nothing gained. And that would help me to go with my heart more than.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Patricia. I'll let you take over. Patricia will be continuing with a bit more of a presentation now.
Okay, so let me bring up this. So thank you for those great questions, and hopefully we'll get to more of those later. I'm shifting gears, so that was my story. This part of the program is all about the 3 catalysts for cultivating courage. And when I got the idea for Growing Bold, I had to unpack what transpired in my life that was allowing me to grow bold. And I discovered what I call the 3 catalysts for cultivating courage. And so we're going to go through these one by one, what they are, how they showed up in my life and my story of moving to France, and then how you can use these catalysts in your life, and especially during times of uncertainty, to build resilience and have a sense of hope. All right. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So what are the 3 catalysts for cultivating courage? They are setting a meaningful goal, and that is a goal that is tied to your core values, shifting your perspective, and building self-confidence. Now, these 3 catalysts are interrelated and synergistic. So if you work on any one of them, it helps to strengthen the others. And on the right side of the slide, you'll see what I call the growing bold starburst. In the center is your comfort zone. And it is bordered by a triangle that have the 3 catalysts for cultivating courage. And as you work and develop these catalysts, your comfort zone expands because you start to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. And so that expands. And as you continue to develop these, you will find yourself in the points of the starburst, and you're going to be feeling more true to yourself. You're going to feel more authentic. You'll have a greater sense of self-awareness, and you'll be more compassionate. You'll have more self-discipline, and you'll know what's really important to you. You'll have greater clarity of mind. And you will also have a higher sense of self-esteem. And then finally, you'll have this feeling of inner peace that is unknowable until you have it. And that allows you to spread your wings and soar. Right? So that is what the 3 catalysts for cultivating courage are. Now, for the first one, setting a meaningful goal. Now, I decided I was going to put some pictures of me and my journey in here. This is me on the left-hand side at the train station, in front of the train station in Perpignan, the center of the world. And that was during my first year in France. And then the second picture is of me on my balcony of my apartment, looking out onto those beautiful, beautiful mountains. And so the meaningful goal that I set for myself was to move to France. But there were other smaller, meaningful goals that I had set for myself that led for me to get to where I am today. Learning French, traveling by myself, those were, the stepping stones to the bigger goal. So when I say setting a meaningful goal, what do I mean by that? Well, that is when you commit to an intention and decide you're going to work toward it. And this intention is based on your core values. And it can be this meaningful goal can be something big like moving to a foreign country, or it could be something smaller like deciding I'm going to brush up on a foreign language. The beauty of setting a meaningful goal is that a lot of times when we are in situations of uncertainty and we feel like we don't have control, we can get stuck in our heads about all the things that we want to do but feel we can't do. We feel like there are things out of our control. But once we get into action, we set the goal and we start taking action, we get out of our head, and that frees us to just move forward and see other opportunities and other ways forward. And then setting a meaningful goal also helps you to have something to look forward to. Now, I keep talking about setting a meaningful goal that is tied to your core values. So when I say core values, what do I mean by that? Well, our core values are principles that we believe that are important in the way that we show up in life and in work. They motivate us to do the things that we do, and sometimes they motivate us not to do something. And they help us to make better decisions. So in my story, there were several core values at play, but I've circled the top 3. For my move to France, the reason that I decided that I wanted to move to France was about personal challenge and personal growth. I had been doing bigger and bigger things in my life, like writing and publishing a book and speaking publicly. And those things were really, have been out of my comfort zone, but then they weren't. And so I was looking around for another challenge, and the idea of moving to a French-speaking country, I thought, well, that would allow me to have a lot of challenges, and I wouldn't be looking for the next challenge anytime soon. And 3 years later, I can attest to the fact that that is true. That was a good decision on my part. Another core value that was at play in my story was integrity. When I shared that I was working at a job where my boss asked me to do something that didn't feel right to me, and I stood up for that because I didn't want to get to the end of my life being ashamed of something I had done, the integrity was at play there. And so being able to look into that and say, no, this is really important for me to not do, and to stand up, come what may, whether I lose my job, whether I get demoted, that is really important to me. And in doing so, that really opened me up and taught me that I have a voice. And that was on my path of that internal growth as well. And then finally, freedom. I mentioned that after my mom died, I couldn't go visit her in New Jersey anymore. And I decided that I wanted to travel. I didn't want to stay at home for my vacations. And the fact that I would have to travel alone and hadn't done that before, that scared me a little bit. But I felt like freedom was important to me. And so moving past that fear so that I could experience that freedom was really important to me. And so knowing that these core values help to propel you forward, even when you feel a sense of trepidation, it is very powerful. So setting a meaningful goal and focusing on what you can do instead of what you can't do is so helpful in times of stress. Now, the ways you can do that is you can look to your key core values and set a small goal and work toward that daily. Now, you might be saying, I don't even know what my key core values are. We all have them. And they're working the backgrounds of our lives. But when we bring them to the forefront of our mind, we can make decisions more easily. We know what's right, what is more right for us and less right for us. And so getting in touch with that is really important. And at the end of this talk, I have some resources. And one of the resources is a values assessment that will help you to highlight your top 3 to 5 values so that you can use that in your day-to-day life. And then once you do look to your key core values and set a goal to work toward, remind yourself of this goal daily and the value that it will support. And then finally, take stock of your progress that you're making every day, no matter how small. Because when we feel like we aren't making progress, that can be a demotivator. But we are, whether we know it or not, making progress. And so it's important to look to that. So that is catalyst number 1, setting a meaningful goal. So here is catalyst number 2, and that is shifting your perspective. Now, the picture that is on your screen is in fact of me, and that it was taken in 2009. And before I had lost 75 pounds. And then I'm with my dad and my mom. And this is about 1 year before the death of my dad and 4 years before the death of my mom. And I put this picture on this shifting your perspective slide because the death of my dad jolted me into reality, jolted me out of this stupor of just going through the motions and caused me to say, wait a minute, Patricia, you don't want to get to the end of your life having regrets about what you wish you had done, but were afraid to do. So that was a huge shift in perspective that changed my life. And then, of course, the death of my mom was a big shift as well. At that 1 year anniversary, causing me to realize, oh, I did that. What else can I do? And that had me looking around for other things to work toward. So when I say shifting your perspective, what do I mean by that? Well, first, let's talk about what perspective is. Your perspective is a frame of reference that you have based on your beliefs, your background, your upbringing, your education, your experiences, your successes, your failures. And it can cause you to have a tunnel vision and not be able to see outside of those blinders. And so when I talk about shifting your perspective, it is changing your vantage point so that you can see things differently and do things differently and approach things differently. there are shifts in your perspective that can take you higher or they can take you lower. Now, for example, after the death of my dad, had I chosen to say, oh, woe is me, my dad died, what am I going to do? I can't do anything about it. Life sucks. And I curled up in a ball, I would not have progressed the way I have. And so the shifts in perspective that I'm focusing on in this presentation are the shifts to the positive, because they are expansive. They help you to see possibilities, options, and opportunities, even in the face of adversity. All right, and shifts in perspective can come about in a number of ways. The loss of a loved one, as I've already shared with you, but also just having new experiences. Being open to doing something that you never thought that you would do, like taking a laughter yoga class, that can give you a shift in perspective. Reading a book or taking a course can as well. Now, we have a tendency to have certain thought patterns, and oftentimes the thought patterns that we have are negative thought patterns, and they keep us stuck. They keep us they don't help us to move forward. They can cause us to spiral down into despair or depression. But when you are aware of the certain thought patterns, the negative thought patterns, then you can then break them and shift to more positive ones. And so these gales are limiting beliefs that shape your perspective. And I'm going to go through each one of these one by one, because once you know what they are and what they look like, the next time you hear yourself saying something like that, you can say, oh, Patricia said, this is an interpretation. Wait a minute, how does she say I can break this pattern so that I don't get stuck in negativity? All right, so the first one I want to talk about is the L, the limiting beliefs. And I'm going from the bottom to the top because at the bottom, there is a lower emotional charge because it's less personal. So limiting belief is a generalization, and it's widely held and unchallenged. Now, when somebody says, oh, blondes have more fun, and they believe it, maybe they're blonde and they don't go out because they believe it, that is a limiting belief. In my story of my move to France, I had a limiting belief that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, that you don't quit a job without having another one in hand. And that caused me to, really question whether or not it was smart for me to make this leap. But what broke me from that was my Uncle Bob, who is of the same generation as my parents. And when I told him that I was planning to make this move, he was so excited for me. And I couldn't really understand how he could really be happy for me, because I thought he would have the same beliefs as my parents. And so I shared with him the idea that a bird in a hand is worth two in the bush. And he said, oh yeah, I know that expression, but I prefer the expression nothing ventured, nothing gained. And right there, that blew that limiting belief out of the water, because now I had the permission to actually just go full speed ahead with my dream. So those are limiting beliefs. The next one up the rung are interpretations. And that's when you read into something that has happened to you as the only possible reason for it happening. Now, I love this example. Say you are giving a presentation at work, and your boss is standing in the back of the room, and you're halfway through your presentation, and all of a sudden you catch your boss's eyes, and he is rolling his eyes, and all of a sudden you say to yourself, oh, he must not agree with me. He must not like what I am saying. And so you get off track a little bit, and you stumble over some words, you pull it together, but it's not your best performance. At the end of the presentation, because you have a great relationship with your boss, you go back there and you say, hey, why didn't you like my presentation? I saw you back here rolling your eyes. And he says, oh my gosh, you saw that? I thought you did a really good job. I got these new contact lenses and they're really dry, and I was just trying to get them right in my eyes. I'm so sorry about that. That is an interpretation, okay? So, interpretations are strange things because they can seem so real, but you can break them. There's a way that you can break them, and I will share that in the next slide. Now, assumptions, the belief that just because something happened to you in the past, that it will happen again. Now, in my story, I talk about how I landed a job after the death of my mom. I landed a job in record time, in 3 months instead of 9 months. And for my whole career, whenever I looked for a job, it took me 9 months to get a job. And so I believe that it takes 9 months to get a job. But that assumption was blown out of the water when I went about looking for a job in a different way. I had just lost my mom. And so my approach was much different from the way it had been in years past. I was much more relaxed about it. I knew I would get a job probably in 9 months, and boom, I got a job pretty quickly. So that is assumptions. And then finally, you've got gremlins. And gremlins are that small voice in your head that when you are about to do something, and typically it's something big, that tells you you are not good enough. You are not smart enough. You're not tall enough, you're not rich enough, you're not whatever enough to do that thing that you truly want to do. And so those are the limiting beliefs that shape our perspective, that narrow our vantage point and can hold us back, all right? But there are some questions you can ask yourself that will break you out of that unconscious thought pattern and get you thinking more positively. So here are the perspective shifts that I had in my journey. Talked about the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's a limiting belief. Oh, for interpretation. Now, I didn't believe that I could move to a foreign country because I was in my 50s when I did it. And I'd only seen people in their 20s doing it. So I believed that only 20-somethings move abroad. But when I started doing research and saw, oh, there are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s actually doing it, that broke that interpretation. So, and then the third one was about the innate talent of speaking a foreign language. My brother, he was gifted in languages. And so in high school and college, I really didn't apply myself because I thought he had gotten all of the language genes. And so I believed that I really couldn't learn a foreign language. And that was based on an assumption in the past, in high school and college, I couldn't do it. So could I do it again? Could I do it now? And then the interpretation was that, my brother had all of the genes and I didn't. So those were the perspective shifts that happened or were at play during my journey and my move to France. Now, here's the slide I was talking about where you can ask yourself a few questions that will help you to break that unconscious thought pattern. And so for limiting beliefs, only blondes have more fun, you can ask yourself the question, where did that belief come from? And how true is that really? And that gets you thinking about, well, wait a minute, whose belief is that anyway? For interpretations, your boss is rolling his eyes in the back of the room, and that means he doesn't like your presentation. You can ask yourself, well, what else could be the case? Or if I thought the 180-degree opposite, what would I be telling myself? For assumptions, it takes 9 months to get a job. You could ask yourself, well, why does this time have to be like all of the other times? Or you could ask, how am I different now? Right? And then finally, for the gremlin, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, there is a technique that I'm going to talk about in the next segment that will help you to, the next time you think that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not whatever enough to do the thing you want, that you can bring in to help counter that. All right, so that is shifting your perspective catalyst number 2. And so to help you in times of uncertainty, definitely we're going through crazy times now. Some of us are in lockdown. And that can spiral us down into unhappiness or despair. But when you catch yourself in one of these negative thought patterns, you can ask yourself, well, what are you telling yourself about the current situation? And then you can counter with one of the questions that was on the previous slide to help break free from that and start to see how you actually have more control than you think you do. So catalyst number 3, build self-confidence. Now, these two pictures are the before and after picture. The one on the left of the screen is me on January 15th, 2018. I'm at Dulles International Airport. And that expression on my face is a mix of emotion. I'm petrified because I'm about to board a plane to move to France. I'm excited. I'm calm because I feel like I'm making the right move. I'm curious about what's going to be on the other side. There's that whole range of emotions. And then the picture on the right-hand side is me. Finally, I've landed at Charles de Gaulle, and then I've taken the train 5 hours south to Perpignan. And many, many, many hours later, and I am exhausted but exhilarated. And that is the picture on the right. And to do all of that, I had to build my self-confidence. I didn't always believe that I could do this. But how did I do that? Well, so first of all, when I say building self-confidence, I mean increasing the degree of faith that you have in yourself that you will be able to accomplish something. Increasing the belief in yourself and your abilities. And you can build your self-confidence in a number of ways. You can look back to past accomplishments that you didn't think that you would be able to achieve, but actually did, and that can boost your confidence. You can accept the compliments that other people give you. Like when I was in Quebec, the Quebecois said, "Oh, your accent was so good," and I latched onto that. It wasn't that I could speak or understand anything, but I latched onto that, and that fueled me to continue to practice and practice. Now, you may have inborn talents, and perhaps you're musical and you come from a musical family. Well, if you do, own that, own that, and take that, and know that. And then finally, we build self-confidence when we get good at something. And how do we get good at something? When we practice, when we have a lot of experience doing something over and over again. First, you got to take action, then you got to practice, and then you get better and you have more self-confidence. All right. So in my move story, I built self-confidence in a number of ways, but through the encouragement of others. My Uncle Bob telling me nothing ventured, nothing gained, the encouragement of the locals in Quebec. I even hired a coach because I knew that I had wanted to move to France, but I wasn't really doing anything about it for a year and a half, except for practice my French. And I knew I had to do more than that in order to make the move. And so my coach encouraged me, and she pointed out ways that helped me to build my self-confidence. Also, I looked at my past achievements, and created what I call a confidence anchor. So that 1 year anniversary, once again, of living without a parent, that opened me up to the idea that I could thrive despite the death of my parents, and that I didn't think that I could do that, and I had. So that opened me up to using that as, oh, well, I don't think I can do this move to France, but I didn't think I could do this thing over here. So perhaps I could. And then when we get stuck or we don't feel like we can do something, a lot of times it's because we don't have the information on what it will take. And maybe we're afraid to get that information. In fact, one of the reasons I didn't move forward with making my move sooner was because I had a dream of moving to France, and that dream fueled me. I was going to a job that I really wasn't liking anymore. I was divorced. My life still wasn't as good as I would like it. And so this dream that I had to move to France was was fueling me. It helped me get through the day. And so if I researched and found that moving to France was impossible, I wouldn't even have the dream. And so I didn't want to get that information. But my coach told me, you need to find out what it will take to do this. And you need to report back next time and let me know. And so I had to do that. And then once I found out, then I was free to do what I needed to do to make it happen. And then finally, practice and repetition help to build confidence, as I stated before. With the language, with traveling alone, those were huge in my journey to France. So you can build your self-confidence and develop resilience from within. Look to personal development opportunities that you can do on your own right now, right? You may feel like, oh, I can't do anything, right now because of the conditions. But there are things that you can do to work on yourself right now that will help you to feel better about yourself. And then celebrate small wins every day. Now, when I was losing weight, when I was in the process of losing 75 pounds, I would write out 3 wins every evening. And the wins can be really, really small. One of the wins that I wrote out then was that I had opened the refrigerator door, saw this delicious looking piece of chocolate cake in there, and I did not eat that piece. And so that is a win. It doesn't have to be huge, but it helps to make you feel like you are making progress. So that is the build self-confidence catalyst for cultivating courage. So there you have it. Setting a meaningful goal tied to your core values, shifting your perspective, and building self-confidence. These are your 3 catalysts for cultivating courage. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the breakout sessions where you can ponder this question, talk about this question, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what you thought about the session, and I can answer any more questions that you have. So Corinne, do you want to share how we're going to manage this segment? Oh.
Apologies, my computer didn't want to unmute there for a moment.
I wasn't sure if I needed to do something.
No, you're all good. You're all good. So we've gone ahead and I have popped the question that Patricia just had on the screen into the chat. So when you go into your breakout rooms, that question will go with you. So you have it for reference. You're going to be split up into breakout rooms. Patricia, you're going to be put into one, but you'll have the ability to move between them. Okay. And you're free to talk about that, expand from there. And we look forward to hearing what you all have to say. So we will see you very soon.
So now it's just time to, how was the breakout session? Did you learn a lot about, or share a lot about what you learned?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So if there are questions, because I went through each of the catalysts without a break for, oh, do you understand? I'd love to have your questions. If you want to share your biggest takeaway, or if you have questions, or if the questions from before, this time is the time to ask them.
Can I share something on behalf of our group?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
I think one of the things that we started talking about right away was the value of parents and the relationship you had with your parents. And all of us spontaneously, throughout everything, or really were very open about a relationship with our parents and how we missed them or not, or we are lucky they're still there. But it showed how important the role of parents is in our lives, whether they're still there or not. And that's just something, a takeaway we all had in our group.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I mean, I think it's a lot of times we don't recognize that until we don't have them, right?
Does anyone else had the same, discussed the same things, or was struck by the same same point?
Not really. No.
We did
No.
in our group, and I was with Ann Blake, Kim Hunter, and Nadia, and we all had that same experience, and certainly I did, and my story is shockingly similar to yours, Patricia. But it seems to be the death of a parent, particularly the last death when you are now by yourself, it seems to be that first brush, really poignant brush with your own mortality. And for me, it was getting a jump on what it was I really, really wanted to do, because seeing my mother die, I thought, I don't think, at least in my view, she did everything she wanted to do in her life. And I don't want to feel that way myself.
Yeah.
It's about regrets. It's about, if fear holds you back, suddenly time flies, you're on your deathbed and you haven't tried. Never mind the accomplishment. It's the trying to follow a dream, to follow your heart, and to do something with whatever time is remaining.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important there's so many things that hold us back from doing what we truly want. Sometimes we don't know who we are. We don't know what we want, right? But sometimes it's that fear, right? It's that fear of failure. It's that fear of being different, standing out. Everyone else is just, doing this going to work thing. And I want to do this thing over here, but then I'm going to stand out. And so there's a number of reasons, and being in touch with your values and who you are and what you want out of life is so important.
Yeah. And not being afraid at any time. All my friends are retiring, and I've started a business. It's like, okay, I guess I'm a really late bloomer, but life and time gives you whatever it is, and you need to grab it.
Yeah. Agree.
Well, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, something that came up in our group was actually, how do you become so certain about what you want to pursue or what your goal is without, doubting it? And that we had a very interesting discussion also around distractions, that you have to create an environment where you can actually sit with your thoughts and, question them without any distractions. We talked a little bit about social media, being distracted by events in life that are not so important. And so this was something that we discussed, because I guess in my group, a lot of us were just like, okay, how do we become sure that our dreams are actually not just some fantasies?
And were you able to, in the group, to come up with ways to determine whether or not the goals that you set for yourself are the goals you feel like are the goals that are right for you?
I don't know if we were able to determine that straight away, but we did talk about different things that can help create an environment that will allow us to determine that. So we talked about taking distractions away, making time for yourself, saying no more often. So we talked about creating that environment where we can determine that for ourselves.
Yes, I think that's great to have the environment that will help to foster that. I think the other thing that is important is to take action. You may feel like, oh, I want to do this thing, but I'm not really sure if this is really what I should be doing. Well, once you take a step forward, and start working toward that, you'll get a sense. Is this really something I want to do, or is it not? And I think sometimes I'm the kind of person who is very loyal, and integrity is huge for me. And so if I set a goal, I say I'm going to do something, I want to commit to that and do it, no matter what, whether it feels right or not. But I have learned now that it's okay for me to change my mind, right? Because in taking that step and taking that action and saying, oh, I want to learn to play the cello, all right? And I do that, and I'm like, oh no, this really isn't for me. I give myself permission to stop and say, no, this isn't right for me, but I do think that the flute is for me, right? And then I go in that direction so that I am doing things that feel right for me, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Patty, we were talking about, there was one of the gals in my group was mentioning that she really found that getting together with other people and maybe just having, she called it like a springboard group, like met once a week or something, and just like talking about goals that they had, but they hadn't acted on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds to me like a group, group counseling session or whatever that we could do together. But she was saying that, once she started talking to people, she was able to break it down, and she was able to like go, oh, well, if I need to like empty out this huge garage I have, like, where do I start? And it was sort of like overwhelming. But then when she started talking to people, then, they sort of, somebody gave her advice on one thing and another, and, and she was able to get started. So maybe, this kind of springboard kind of group might be useful as well.
I think so, because I think a lot of times we have ideas and thoughts in our head, and it's when we are able to vocalize, sometimes it's writing, but when we're able to vocalize, we can see things more clearly. And then in addition, having the feedback from others who may have had similar experiences, who can help you to move forward and break it down. In addition to the fact that if you decide you're going to choose a goal and you have this group, they can help to hold you accountable.
Yep.
I think the accountability is huge. I know that my idea was launched first in a brainstorming session with friends. There was one friend who was instrumental to begin with and said, let's do this brainstorming session. That session put the flesh on the bones of my idea. But then it wasn't until I heard words coming out of my mouth to somebody else that I didn't know, that I was telling the idea to and saying, I'm going to be doing this, that it became real. And I thought, oh my God, if I don't do this now, I don't like the way that will make me feel about how I told that other person I would be doing this.
Yeah.
It's huge. Accountability.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but it propels you forward.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think that's important to admit. It is terrifying, and that's okay. Terrifying sometimes propels you forward. It will, one way or another.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes.
Whatever.
What they're laughing about.
Randy, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it was going back to this idea of like, how do you know, and I think really that's a limiting thought that society gives us, that there's only one dream for us to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And that we must know with certainty that that's the dream we need to follow. And I've lived in 5 countries. This is my 5th currently. And I've reinvented myself in every single one. And there's been no one single dream except for being the core of who I am. And as long as I was able to enact that in various ways, then I was fine, And so I think when we think about what Patricia said about limiting thoughts, we need to think about the limiting thoughts that society feeds us and how we buy into those, and whether or not they're actually helpful for us. Because that to me is one of the most limiting, that there's only one right place, there's only one right dream, there's only one way to be that's right for us. And also the accountability. I work with a lot of graduate students, and I work with them a lot about setting up accountability groups. And I think it is such an important thing. Find those people that you trust and that you can share your dreams with, and that they're going to be helpful and careful with those dreams as well.
I really appreciate this input of not just having one thing that is supposed to be the right thing or the right path for you. But I guess it also just opens up the question for me of, I am a graduate student, and I feel like I'm constantly grappling with, okay, so what path am I going to take? Where do I want to work? Where do I want to be going? And I feel like sometimes I'm overwhelmed by the amount of options and the amount of ideas. Even if they're not full-fledged ideas, they're just kind of little sparks of things that I could be doing. And I have a really hard time kind of like going through these and deciding, okay, which ones are the ones that I actually want to pursue. And then sometimes because of that inability to decide, I feel like I get stuck with just not doing anything, which also feels really, really, I guess, disempowering. So how to deal with that, because I'm hoping I'm not the only one dealing with that.
Yeah, when there's so many opportunities to pursue, and that those choices kind of overwhelm you and then stop you in your tracks. I would say, for me, one of the things that grounds me, and I think as you grow and develop and you get to know yourself better and better, this will be easier and easier. But one of the things is looking at, well, what is my true need right now, right? So I could do any number of these things, and you say they might not even be well fleshed out, right? And that's taking up space in your head, right? So if you can kind of get rid of those and say, okay, yeah, that's just noise, and then focus on, the 3 or 4 that, have legs, and go into looking at what your values are and how each one of those would support or not support your values, that can help you to get a little bit clearer on what's important. And then the other thing that I alluded to or spoke about was really that the logic, I would take the logical path when I was younger. And now I'm listening more to what my heart is telling me will make me happy or will fill me up, right? Yeah, this is the logical path because this will earn me a lot of money, or this will get me to where society says I should be. But in my heart, this option over here really makes me feel better. And so being able to listen to that and to figure out how that could be a reality, that can help you as well. Does that help?
Thanks. I think so. I hope so.
Great.
Patricia, we've got 1 minute left if you want to close out.
Oh, okay. Let me share my screen again. And all right, so I want to leave you with this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes by R.D. Laing. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there is little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. And so, I'm going to leave you with that. I just love that. That speaks to perspective shifts all day long. But before we go, I wanted to give you my contact information. Let's keep in touch. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, also on Medium. So follow me on those places if you'd like. And my email address is on the screen as well. And as I spoke about resources that can help you to use these 3 catalysts for cultivating courage in your life, here are some, there's a values assessment that you can take in about 10 minutes to figure out what are your key core values right now. And then also there are 3 other activities that will help you to find a confidence anchor, one to help you to shift your perspective, and then one to help you to set a goal, and not necessarily a huge goal, but a goal that is smaller, more bite-sized. So you can check those out as well. And I want to thank you so much for joining me and spending this little time with me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patricia. Thank you so much. This has been really, really interesting, good, far beyond what my expectations were. I mean, it's so inspiring. And it would be wonderful if all the participants could send us at mhceuropean at gmail.com feedback. That's the email address that sent you the link to the session. I actually received that, but send it to that address so that we can evaluate this session and try to plan new sessions in the future. But also, if you have any suggestions of how we could develop meetings, formats like the one we had today. I mean, all the tools that Patricia gave us, the reference to her books, to her sites are important, but I think there was a value, at least I could see a value in the discussion among ourselves today, our Mount Holyoke women who shared similar experiences in the past, some of us Europeans moving to America and some Americans moving to Europe, and all the doubts and hesitations and the successes that we had. So if you feel that we should continue and offer workshops and sessions that allow us to share and discuss these issues together, please write us a note. And my thanks also go to Virginia Ross, who has been fundamental in helping me develop these sessions, to Corinne, who is our unsurpassable Zoom master, as we call her. And so let us hear your voices. We are here to develop more and better sessions. And so we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for attending, everyone.